Hey, welcome to another welcome to another episode of Fight Outnumbered and Win. Hey, today we're going to do a video about supporting by fire. As we prepare for our big capstone training event this summer, I think one of the things I want to talk about is a key mistake I see throughout my career is really our ineffective use of supporting by fire. Typically I've seen support by fire position is usually the same way. The maneuver element will move forward. There's a lot of focus on which way they're going to maneuver toward. And then they will get online upon contact. They quickly jump online, and everyone will kind of get into a shooting position, and they become almost like glue, where they lay on the ground or they park their vehicle, and everybody just immediately starts shooting forward as fast as they can. Sometimes you'll have an NCO that's really controlling the rates of fire. You'll hear gun one, go, gun one, gun two, go. You'll hear maybe he'll throw out different fire commands, sustain, cyclic, rapid. Sometimes you'll even have somebody with a laser or trying to designate targets, and that's if you're kind of getting to the better version of it. But most of the time, it's just a bunch of people online shooting as much as they can, and then a lot of the focus is trying to maneuver, and then of course everyone goes to the right because they always do, and then we put a lot of efforts on the shift and lift criteria. Where, okay, shift fire, and sometimes you'll see it where they'll have the objective in a quadrified, and we start shifting across. Okay, so I don't think that's really truly supporting by fire. So what I want to do is kind of talk to you about what I think supporting by fire well looks like. Okay, so it all hinges on this one idea, and the idea is don't be shooting unless somebody's moving, and don't be moving unless somebody's shooting. So back in basic training, we would always do the same drill, and you did it, where you have your buddy team live fire. So this person goes up, and you have the command, cover me while I move, got you covered, buddy, and he starts shooting, and this guy goes up to the next line, and this guy moves up, and I always learn it set, moving, set, moving. So the idea is one person is set, has his weapon ready to shoot, full of ammo, is engaging a target, can see his target, is shooting, providing fires, and allows the other person to get to another position, to get closer, or to get an angle on their opponent. Because remember what typically happens if you're in a gunfight and there's some sort of rock here, well, and I'm shooting at him, there's your enemy person. If I'm shooting directly at them, the rock is going to stop the bullet. So this person needs to get into a position where they have an angle to shoot at them. And this person's providing covering fire to keep that person pinned to allow them to do that. And that's just how it works. So set, moving, set, moving. This is also the way that, in your ROTC days, so we talk about the moving techniques based on the expectancy of contact. So what are the movement techniques based on the expectancy of contact? So traveling overwatch.
Bounding overwatch.
And what's the difference between traveling and when do you do which?
When you expect contact.
Yeah, based on the likelihood of contact,
Sure.
Right? So if you are, if contact is, if it's possible, it's likely, then you move into a traveling overwatch. And a traveling overwatch is nothing more than someone is focusing on navigating, and the other person is focusing on overwatching you while you move, because you cannot do a job and provide security. It's impossible. Your focus is doing this. I'm not seeing who's sneaking up on me to cut my throat or whatever. So you need someone to overwatch you. That's traveling overwatch. When you go into bounding overwatch,
you're in contact.
Contact is imminent. So when you're going to get into a gunfight, you go into bounding overwatch. Bounding overwatch is just that principle, and it depends on echelon. It starts, it could be 2 people, it could be 2 fire teams, it could be 2 squads, it could be 2 platoons, it could be 2 battalions, it could be 2 brigades, it could be 2 divisions. The same idea. One element is stationary, because can you shoot better moving or sitting tight?
Stationary.
Stationary, shoot better, right? One element is stationary or in a shooting position to provide lethal fires to support the moving by fires, and the other person is moving. That's all it is. If you break down tactics, we try to make them super complex, but it all comes back to that same idea. Don't be moving unless somebody is shooting, and don't be shooting unless someone is moving. And for you leaders out there, when you start doing your sand tables, that's a question that should always be in your mind is, I'm moving, who's been doing the shooting? And if you're shooting, somebody needs to be moving. If you don't have that right, then you need to rethink of what you're doing. So this gets back to a supporting by fire. Now, one thing that I want to highlight is when you go into a support by fire position. So here I have a little diagram here. And here's our enemy. Enemies always go 2 up, 1 back.
Always.
So when you move up into support, say we're kind of conducting attack on the enemy and there's just some terrain right here. Okay, so typically we're going to set in a support by fire position to allow us to assault across the objective. Now here's a fun fact. I had to actually go to the doctrine people and look this up. Okay, I'm going to throw this off the cuff for you. What is the difference between an attack and an assault? Interesting question.
Does it involve seizing or clearing an objective?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But you'll hear them interchangeably. Like you have an assault element. We're going to conduct an attack, right? Mm-hmm. And an attack, you typically have support, security, and assault element. We always hear an assaulting element. So what's the difference between an assault and an attack? So if you're those watching, you can put in the comments. I don't know.
I don't know.
So this is what I come up with. I had to go to the doctrine people because I don't think it's interesting. I asked the doctrine people for betting, and they're like, well, and I finally got an answer, but I think what it all comes to simplify it all. You provide attack is an offensive action. You can attack through a raid, you can attack through an ambush, you can a deliberate attack, and it's an overall offensive action meant to kill or capture the enemy. Fair? An assault is when you actually come across the objective and you're within hand grenade range. To kill or capture, you kill those who resist and capture those that give up. It's when you actually come into with hand grenade distance. So when you think of an assault element, if you think about, hey, we're going to employ hand grenades, you're in the assault range. When you actually come across in hand grenade distance, then you're assaulting. You're coming across where you think they are. So question then is, what conditions do you as a leader want when the enemy, when they're on this area and you actually assault across? What do you want the enemy to look like in that posture?
At their weakest, so either wounded or down, suppressed.
So you want them wounded?
Dead.
Dead?
Preferred.
What else?
Undercover, suppressed.
Yep, suppressed. Shocked. Yeah. This. If you have these things, when the assault element comes, this would probably equal you're going to win and the assault element's going to be safe. If they are not wounded, if they're not dead, if they're not suppressed, if they're not in a shocked factor, what does that mean for those assaulting?
It could be a rough day.
It's going to be much more dangerous, and it's going to turn into a lot of them are going to get hurt themselves. So now if you think this is the conditions that we want the enemy to look like when we assault, when we come into this is where we finish them off. This is the term, the assault equals finish them. You ever heard finish?
Sure.
That's what finishing means, is assaulting. You're kill or capturing those who are still left after you've already decided, you've pinned them down, okay? So now backward planet. If this is what we want them to look like, how do they get there? How does the enemy in this area get that way?
How do we get them to that?
Yeah, how do we get them to there?
Well, suppressive fires for one thing, indirect fires, managing our rates of fire to provide, to ensure we have enough ammo to continue to do this while the assault force moves.
Everything you're describing is you're supporting the assault through fires. You're using fires to create these conditions, because this is how you're going to support the assault element. So when you set in, and here's my little hilltop, here's your typical symbol for a support by fire position. When I set in a support by fire position, this purpose is to support my assault with fires. And there's all kind of fires. There are direct fires and indirect fires. Okay? Why both? Why do we have direct and indirect fires?
There's things indirect can do that direct can't.
Exactly. Yeah. This gets into combined arms theory. We've taught lots of videos. When this support by fire position puts up their machine guns and their direct fires and they start shooting at the enemy, what will the enemy do?
Get behind cover.
They'll seek cover. So they're going to find defilade. There'll be things like that. They'll get behind cover and the bullets sling off. Right? So then what do? Now that's not being very supportive. Mm-hmm. So now we make sure we call in our mortars and to hit them in their dead space. So now it puts the enemy in a dilemma. If they stay put, they're going to be blasted out with mortar fire. If they get up and come out from cover, they get cut down by direct fire. That is why you use direct and indirect fire. So now, when we sit in support by fire position to support the assault through fires, now the question is, what does a support by, I'll give you the example, set, moving. Okay, so I'm going to be moving up on the objective. Element 1, I'm set, moving. The other group's me moving. When we say I am set, what does set look like? What does it mean to be set?
You're ready to support the assault force.
Yeah, what does it look like?
So I've identified my sectors of fire from our weapon systems.
Okay, sectors of fire, good.
I have communication.
Comms, good. Who you having comms with?
Higher in the assault element.
Yep.
So you can communicate the
mortars with each other, with the assault element,
yes,
right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what else?
Let's see.
I'd offer security.
Yes, sir.
Because when you are in a support by fire position, this guy's, where's their attention at?
Towards the objective.
Their attention's right here. They call that tunnel vision. Mm-hmm. I am focused here. This person's focused here. This person focused here. This person's focused here. When you are set, you yourself become vulnerable to be fixed and flanked yourself. Especially nowadays with UAVs, your flank is now overhead. So not only you have a geographic flank, you have an overhead flank. Who's watching that? Well, so you have to have your security. You have to have rear security, flank security. If you don't, you yourself have become fixed and likely to be enveloped and flanked yourself. So you have to have sectors of fire. Each one has their sectors of fire. Each one, we have communication with each other, with the maneuver element, so we're cooperating rather than just camping. Okay, we have security up. We have our weapon. We're employing all of our weapons. What I mean by that is this element here, if they have tanks, they're going to start bringing up their tanks. To be set, I need to have my javelin up there, my clue turned on. He's sitting there, he's ready to engage armor threats. We have to have AT-4s. There's our mortar set and ready to support with indirect fire. Do we have comms and all that? And what is our ammo situation? So, if you're maneuvering to the left to assault, once the conditions are ready to assault, what is one of the biggest dangers of that assaulting element? If the support by fire position what? Runs out of?
Ammunition that can no longer maneuver.
Right.
Yep.
One of the things that's happened, I've seen it over and I've been guilty of it, is I start shooting and we are shooting and providing great suppressive fires. Typically, how long does it take to move around to get to an assailable flank? Takes a while, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Once you get to an assailable flank, what's the danger is all of a sudden your support by fire position runs out of ammunition. Now they're no longer supporting. They're just watching and cheering you on. Go, buddy, go. Right? So having the proper, that's why fire commands are so important. That's why where more ammunition's coming. Now, a couple things I think, mistakes I've always seen, is when we start identifying where our support by fire position is going to be. We usually do it on a map or maybe some kind of a leader's recon. What's typically places we put support by fire's positions on?
Somewhere we have good overwatch, so like a hill.
Yeah,
something like that.
fields of fire, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, think about it here. What's the mistake of that?
The enemy's probably going to be out there too.
Exactly. Rarely, if ever, do I see, if I've been assigned a support by fire position, do I think through and rehearse that most likely, if that's a good position, I'm going to have to fight in to my support by fire position. Because they're just not just, hey, look at this great piece of ground. There you go. That their enemies most likely already sitting up here in position to provide early warning or fight it out. So have you thought about what it looks like to actually fight in? So this might actually be a small deliberate attack to get into support by fire position to support an overall, the main attack. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So it's actually, so the other thing that you're going to notice with a support by fire position is the mistake I also see is once folks say, contact front, whatever meters, they just become like glue. They lay down, and I swear they just glue themselves to the ground, and they don't move. I've seen them where there'll be a tree right in front of them, and they're just shooting, and they're not really, you're like, what the hell are you shooting at? It's just a really big mistake when you see with blanks. People do this really bad with blanks. They'll just start shooting, and they're not even on their sights. They have this idea that the sound is doing something, instead of trying to get on their sights and actually be accurate with fire. So to do this well, what this will actually look like is they're not glue, they're actually going to start bounding internally forward to keep pressure on the enemy, because at the minute the pressure, the direct pressure, the enemy is not being pinned down by frontal fire, that is when they no longer are suppressed. So you'll see almost this should be moving into some sort of, hey, ones move up, they move up to get a better angle, twos move up to get a better angle, and you just keep the pressure on, because the enemy has to be wounded, dead, suppressed, and shocked before you assault. So typically the best way I've seen this done is most attacks just get really, always devolve's the right word, I don't know, will end up into just a series of support by fire positions. Because in the end, everything just turns into a frontal assault, no matter what the angle is. What I mean by that is, if I'm shooting frontally, the enemy's going to be focused and shooting back. Once I get to an assailable flank is a code word for vulnerable, which I'm going to get it to here. Well, what's going to happen? And I start shooting this way. Well, the enemy's going to turn and start shooting back at me. So in the end, it always kind of turns into a series of frontal assaults. But what we typically do is you set up a support by fire position frontally, then you set up another support by fire position on a flank, and then everything just becomes a series of support by fire positions to set the conditions until you have the right conditions to kill or capture those who are when you decide to assault. And for me, that's a big decision as a leader, is when to actually assault. Because that's when, don't assault until you are sure you've set these conditions that the enemy look like this.
Sure.
Okay? Anything you want to add?
The one thing I would say, if we talk through all of this, I experienced the terrible support by fires as a cadet. Go to Bullock and you start learning things, and really at Ranger School, that's when I learned about platoon tactics and establishing a support by fire with the 240s. But then, as I fast forward a year later, I'm to that point what you were talking about. We were doing a company live fire, and I had my platoon for the assault, and then I had four strikers with another platoon with the 50 cals and the 240s providing that support by fire in that way. It was completely different from everything I experienced so far in schools or training. So the fundamentals still apply. What you're talking about, whether you're doing this with strikers, whether you're doing this light, all these fundamentals apply. With my assault, was I able to move faster with my platoon, with the strikers? Absolutely. But we still had to have these fundamentals, even if we were using vehicles or not. So I think it's an important thing to think about. The fundamentals still apply no matter how you're doing it. And the big one I think was really cool. I mean, you struggle with it, like especially at Ranger School because I never could get the radios to work and things like that. But when I got to the company live fire stage, not only did we have digital, voice comms, but also we were using what's it called? The big fire, the star clusters, off the knee. And I'm communicating that to my sister platoon leader, and it was so cool to experience that. And completely different when a 50 cal is hitting that objective. It was a trench, very similar to this trench system with a wired obstacle in front of it, but completely different. You can feel that 50 cal in your chest shooting that objective, but the fundamentals don't change. No matter whether you're doing this with M4s, 240s, 249s, all the way up to 50 cal, they do not change.
And in that article you're reading about in preparation for this support by fire position, what was the recommendations that the NCOs had?
So the big four they focused on, it was written by 2E7s, focused a lot about JRTC and what they saw there from weapons squad leaders. But they focused on the establishment, picking a good support by fire, then the fire support control measures, which until I became a platoon leader, I don't think I really understood that with the TRPs, that it's just a target reference, it's not the target, and then communicating that down to the soldier level and be willing to adjust that. Also the rates of fire, the math that goes into that prior while you're doing your TLPs, to figure out how much ammo you're going to need to support this movement for that element. That's a lot to do. And then finally, I think it was the communication piece, verbal and nonverbal, both for the support by fire, how they're communicating that to their gun teams. There's so much that goes into that. And one of the biggest things they said, it's unfortunate, but they said most of the weapons squad leaders they observed at JRTC did not know how to do this. So I think it's one of those things. I remember I had a good weapons squad leader as a platoon leader, and one thing he used to do was take his gun team whenever there was downtime. Draw the 240s, let's go out there, we're just going to drill on the Tomahawk, grassy area, grassy knoll. He would just make them drill and talk through those things, establishing an SOP, how we're going to communicate. So if you have a great weapons squad leader, learn as much as you can from them and then turn that around and teach it to others. Because it's definitely, you think the PL, the platoon sergeant, and that weapons squad leader is the guy. When the platoon sergeant's not there, he's there. That's the senior squad leader. So it's definitely something, if you work with a really good one, have them teach your soldiers and train them as well as you.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is this idea of setting win conditions. The conditions to win, W-I-N, setting the conditions to win, right? So when you are moving up, and now I'm going to support by fire, the assault element, or to get to the next support by fire position, what are the conditions that I need to have set to truly be supporting the moving force? Right? So let's set conditions. And that's what I want you to think about. When am I set? So when I get on the radio and I tell my adjacent unit, we're set. Think about that a little bit more and rehearse what it means to be set. To me, it means that everyone is in there shooting, but they have a good shooting platform. They understand where the enemy is or the template or likely. They understand their sectors of fire, what their targets are. They understand, they have communication with each other so they can cooperate. Hey, they're going left. Hey, they're seeing right. You see that? See TRP1? They're down below it. They're actually communicating with internally and between your adjacent units because you're supporting them by fire. Hey, don't go past phase line white. The enemy is not in that conditions yet or whatever. So you're cooperating, not camping. You have to have security. Who's watching your flanks? Who's watching your rear? Who's watching overhead? You need to be employing all your weapon systems, right? Direct fires, the enemy will adjust and get a position where they're not effective. You have to employ indirect fires. And now with drones, how we're employing, we need to employ our drones because you can see their identified location, aerial munitions, all the things that's really emerging right now. And then ammo consumption. You can only carry so much ammo. So who's coming up with more ammunition? Mm-hmm. And as you're moving forward, who's coming up and distributing ammunition, and that's never rehearsed that I've ever seen. Typically, we just give our UBL, put our ammo, and that's all you get. Well, that's flawed. With all the vehicles that we have and the new drones they have that carry ammunition, more ammunition can be coming up, and people can go and grab and start distributing it out. And you can, if that's happening and that lifeline's working, you could keep a great sustained rates of fire to get to the next, to allow that maneuver element to get to their next supporting position. Last is realize everything just kind of becomes support by fire positions at just different angles. That's why you get to this angle, because you achieve an angle where the enemy's unprepared for. And then it becomes a decision when you assault. When you assault, what you want the enemy to look like is you want them to be wounded. You want them to be dead. You want them to be pinned down and shocked and not in a way to fight back. So your assault element really at that point is capturing those who don't resist and killing those that do. And that's when you have won. Sure. So overall, supporting by fire position, this is what I think it looks like done well. So when you go out there, let's practice that.
Sir.
Anything else?
No, sir.
All right, fight outnumbered and win.